The House will please come to order. We have, before we continue into second reading, we have some floor recognition. So members of the House, each year, the Wyoming Legislature sponsors the Legislative Internship Program, which allows students enrolled at an institution of higher education to obtain credit along with a unique insight into the legislative branch of government and its vital responsibility in creating public policy. High school interns who are sponsored by individual legislators are also an important part of the program and typically serve for 2 weeks during the session. Intern coordinator Lavonda Kopsa joins us along with some of the interns. Lavonda, please say a few words about the program, and then we would like each intern to introduce themselves and share with us where they are from and future career plans. Representatives, please help me welcome Lavonda and these students to the House.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I love to showcase the interns that we have. Today is just college. Some of you have probably seen a lot of the interns running around with badges. We have had our largest group ever of aides, high school interns, and college interns, so almost 30 this year. So it's been an interesting session working with all of them. I'm very excited about the program, and we are looking to do some revamping hopefully this summer and some of that, and just to make it a better fit for the legislature and for the students and academic institutions. So I would like to ask, let's see, in the back, we're going to have each of the students just give you a little bit of information about themselves. So Perry.
Hi there, my name is Perry Henniger. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, but I now live in Laramie, going to the University of Wyoming, majoring in political science with a minor in criminal justice. I'm a senior, and then this fall I'm going to be going to law school.
Hello everyone, my name is Donovan Hayborn. I'm originally from Boise, Idaho, but came here to the beautiful campus of UW to study political science. Like a lot of college kids, I don't really know what my future plans are, but I know I want to help people a lot like the men and women in this legislation do, so thank you guys so much for having me.
I'm Brendan Patterson. I'm from Torrington, Wyoming. I go to EWC, and future plans is secondary education at the college or high school level in history or political science.
My name is Carly Barber. I'm originally from Cheyenne, and I'm currently a criminal justice major at Laramie County Community College, and I hope to go to law school.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. My name is Rachel Reese. I'm originally from Johnstown, Colorado. I'm a student at the University of Wyoming, majoring in energy resource management and development with a concentration in professional land management. And then my future plans are also law school.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rowan Kelly. I'm a political science student at UW. I'm originally from Hawaii, so I came a long way to get here. But I've absolutely fallen in love with Wyoming, and this experience has been amazing. Hopefully, in the future, elected office awaits, but we'll have to wait and see. I probably have to do something else before that, so thank you.
Hello. My name is Anna Loika. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, but now I live in the beautiful town of Laramie. I'm a senior at the University of Wyoming studying political science with a minor in public law. I also am applying to UW Law School and some others, and then in the future, I hope to practice corporate litigation.
I'm Drury for Laramie, Wyoming. I'm currently an aide for Representative Western.
I'm currently a senior studying marketing, and after I graduate, I'm planning to attend graduate school in South Korea.
Wow, what a group. What good career choices and good luck. And, it's just awesome that you guys came here and helped us all. And I know there's more of you out there that helped us. And we really appreciate that. And I hope you had some valuable lessons about politics. And I hope we all learned some from you, right? I mean, I think that's part of it. It's good to see youth in this building. So thank you so much. And thank you, LaVonda, for all you do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if I could get your attention. We're gonna recognize our staff now. And so I'm gonna name them off, and so please hold your applause to the end. And staff, wherever you are at, raise a hand or just come on out and raise a hand when I holler your name in case folks don't know who you are. Just come on in. All right, so we have Chief Clerk Katie Talbot. Here, here. Assistant Chief Clerk Reader John Earnshaw. Yeah. Staff Supervisor Clarissa Nord. Here, here. Computer Floor Clerk Chris Carlson. Awesome. Journal Clerk Gwen Vines. Messenger Kim Withers. Yeah. Attorney Secretary Eve Hamilton. Page Patty Mangini. Yeah. Leadership Secretary Carol Clark. Yeah. She keeps me going down a path so I don't wreck so far. Now for committee secretaries, Judiciary, Debbie Russell. Appropriations, Jackie Childress. Revenue, Marilyn Jeffrey. Education, Ashley Phillips. Committee number 5, Ag, Mark Knotts. Travel, Barb Austin. Corporations, Diana Hicksenbaugh. In transportation, Diana Hicksonbaugh. And minerals is Mark Knotts. And I know I'm not supposed to read the highlight and only the highlighted ones, but I think because they're doing double time, they deserve double the love. So, Labor, Barb Austin. And Rules, Carol Clark. Again. Copy Center Clerk, Sandy Dent. Sergeant at Arms, Dennis Russell. Doorman, Ed Mingini. Yeah. Doorman, Greg Yarber. Break room in the morning is Jackie Wortman. Yay! And break room in the afternoon is Virginia Spindler. So I just want to say how much I appreciate all of the work you've done for us this session, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And when I leave, I will miss all of you. And so thank you. All right, now go right down the aisles where you can, yeah, come on, right down the aisles. All of you got to get through it. There we go. Awesome. All right, we are still at that order of business of bills on second reading. Oh, privilege, yes. Sorry, Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
Please.
Speaker, thank you. So members, today we have members of our own Wyoming wing of the Civil Air Patrol up in the South Gallery, and I want us to welcome them. We have Lieutenant Colonel C.J. Young, who's the commander of the Wyoming Legislative Squadron. We have Major Todd DePorter, Captain Luana DePorter, and Cadet Major Micah Shepard. And I think Cadet Major Shepard is looking to become a nurse at West Point. And so all of this is very exciting. The Civil Air Patrol is an official auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force, and they help not only with disasters in Wyoming, but they help assist in disasters across the country. And so I'm excited to recognize them, and I hope you all will too, and welcome them to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the one thing that I would add is that every member of the legislature is eligible to be an honorary major with the Civil Air Patrol. And if you want to be an honorary major, just please visit with Lieutenant Commander C.J. Young.
Wow. So Civil Air Patrol, welcome to the House. It's good to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do for Wyoming. We appreciate that. Okay, now we are still at that order of business of bills on second reading. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 75. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 75, sponsored by Water, Omnibus Water Bill Construction.
All right, we have an amendment. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 75 and ask for your favorable consideration. Yesterday, after we passed that amendment, I got a visit from our good staff that said there was a bit of a mistake, that the grant and the appropriations didn't exactly match, and so we needed to do a cleanup correction, and this is the same cleanup correction, so nothing's changed. This is what we did yesterday. This is just to make it work in the omnibus water bill. So would ask for your favorable consideration.
Chairman Eklund.
A couple of questions. I think it comes out of account 2, but you could clarify that. And I guess one of the concerns I have with this is that the Water Development Office has not been designed to be an emergency management service to us. And we've done it a little bit in the past, but I've just asked just one more question. Are you sure you've gone through all the avenues? Because usually we have some funding for emergencies that happen throughout the state. Have you looked at those, exhausted them? Because the Water Development Office is very limited on funds. I know we brought in a little bit of extra money to pay for ditch riders that are now in water development. But then this subtracts some money from it. So if you could inform me a little bit as to whether you've looked at those other avenues really well before we do this, and just so the body's aware that it isn't designed to be emergency management. It's concerning to me.
Anybody else for their first time? Chairman? All right. I don't see anybody. Anybody for the second time? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer a couple of those questions, yes, water 2 is where this does come out. So this project was in the planning phase. So it had shifted into an emergency conversation, but this has been something that's been planned. It went through the planning bill, then it went through this bill. We brought our presentation before the committee this last year, where they did award that 43%, and this is just bringing that rest of that in. I will say that maybe there are some other avenues, but we've talked with the chief executive and their office. We've talked with a number of other, and I know that there's some really good folks in my community that are filling out grant applications, and they're working diligently on trying to fund this in other ways. And this was the recommendation that we had, is to go down this avenue from that side. So I hope that answers your question. Is there something else out there? There may be, but from my understanding, we have definitely walked those roads out. And I know from my experience talking with my community, they definitely have done an extensive amount of footwork to do what they have gotten up to this point, and this was the recommendation. So I hope that answers the question, and again, would ask for favorable consideration on this cleanup.
All right, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 75 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 75 has been adopted. Senate File 75 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 86.
Senate File 86, sponsored by Senator Kolb, School Safety and Security Funding.
Senate File 86 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 89.
Senate File 89, sponsored by Senator Cooper, Veterans Ad valorem exemption amount.
Senate File 89 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 100.
Senate File 100, sponsored by Senator Hutchings, prompt payment of insurance claims.
We have an amendment. Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, sadly, regrettably, I would like to withdraw first reading amendment, second reading amendment to Senate File 100.
All right. So second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 100 has been withdrawn. Senate File 100 having been read, excuse me. Senate File 100 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 107.
Senate File 107, sponsored by Senator Landon, e-cigarette and vapor material directory.
We have amendments. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think happily and excitedly, I would like to withdraw second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107. Thank you.
Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107 has been withdrawn. The next amendment on 107 is second reading amendment number 2. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 107, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Everyone, my main concerns with this bill, in my eyes, is that as it's written right now, it leaves a limited exemption for vapor products that were produced before 2016. And since 2016, there's been a lot of diversification in that market specifically, and there are non-tobacco nicotine products that want to go through the process of being approved by the FDA, but ultimately the FDA is experiencing a logjam in their requests. And I see this as a chance to give those folks who they don't want to sell something that is comparably dangerous. They don't want to sell something, that has lead in it. They want to go through the process and actually conform to what the FDA has to say. And the concern primarily arose from Article 1, Section 30 of the Constitution, which says that perpetuities and monopolies are contrary to the genius of a free state and shall not be allowed. And so that's why I bring this amendment.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On and for the amendment, members. So what this amendment does is it adds a Section 3. So that on page 2, this A section is essentially the list of approved products right now, right? So FDA right now only has 23 manufacturers that are officially approved. So that Romanet 1 in Section A talks about those 23 products. Romanet 2 is an exemption specifically for products between when the FDA started allowing them and when the FDA said that now we have this list and you have to apply to this list. And so this is a grandfather for all of those things in between 2008 and 2016. The issue there is that this exemption is specifically for the largest market share of e-cigarettes. It's the one owned by the big company that is lobbying many of us right now. And so we have a grandfather exemption for them. What we don't have a grandfather exemption for is all the other existing manufacturers between 2016 and 2022, where the rule was enacted they've been able to submit applications, so the applications are valid and they fit that, but the FDA hasn't been able to rule on them because the FDA has, frankly, 1 million submissions and they haven't been able to work through any of them, including the one from the largest manufacturer that is sitting outside in our chambers. So the concern here is do we have an even playing field? Do we have one where we'll exempt the largest group that has the e-cigarette market? They have about 37% of the e-cigarette market, and then leave out the other ones that aren't allowed to be exempted? Or do we put them all on an even playing field and say that they all should be allowed? So I'll urge your aye on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Brown, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is kind of, I don't disagree with the synopsis that the previous speaker just said, that we're trying to make a carve out here. And what I heard yesterday was, well, you know, if we're being lobbied for one particular group, you know, then we're just settling in and we're just having them, we're kind of settling in on, are we protecting them? And then I literally just heard, well, there's another group out here lobbying us, and so now we need to protect them. Well, that's not what this bill is about. Our bill is not about protecting the companies. I'm not worried about the companies. I'm worried about the consumers. I'm worried about the people that are smoking these products. And that is exactly what this bill is trying to do, is trying to protect those people. And when we walk in and we say, okay, well, we're going to hear from this side of things, and they've got this big group of stuff over here that we want to exempt. Do we? Is that really what we want to do? What this boils down to is synthetic material. And you'll notice in the amendment, right? The amendment says for non-tobacco nicotine. Non-tobacco nicotine electronic cigarette and vapor material products. The manufacturer submitted a pre-market application to the USDA or USFDA. I also heard the conversation that this is the FDA's decision. I also want to make that very clear. This was not the FDA that made this decision, ladies and gentlemen. This was our boys and girls out in the big white dome out in Washington, D.C. They are the ones that created this, okay? So this is not an unelected bureaucrat. This is not somebody who went out there and just decided to do this on their own. This was the elected officials that made this situation occur, okay? So this is a really special carve out for a very particular individual. And it's pretty interesting when you walk out through Ambush Alley here and you see the ambushers, you know, snagging every single person that can walk through those gates. I don't know in my 8 years that I've seen that happen, where I've seen that many people attacking for one particular bill. That being said, there's a reason for that. Heard all over the place, and I'm really glad that the First Amendment that was not passed here because...
Mr. Speaker.
What's your point?
I would think we wouldn't want to use words like ambush for our constituents.
Well, since the speaker wasn't paying attention, we'll just note that and move on, Chairman Brown.
Fair enough, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, we'll just move on. Mr. Speaker, where I'll lay you down with this, and I'll hop off the microphone here, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect our consumers. I sent you all an email. That email had 2 different links on it, as well as a registry list from another state. Sent you yet another state that has well over 10,000 products out there. These products we're not trying to ban anything except those that are dangerous. Those that we don't know what the chemicals are, those that we don't have any indication whether or not they are going to cause a public harm. That's what we're trying to stop. And it's not just China. It is other manufacturers across this country, or across this world, I'm sorry. So be very, very careful when we start bringing an amendment in like this to create a carve out for one particular area. Because once we do that for this, then we need to do it for somebody else, and we need to do it for somebody else, and very soon, we just don't need the registry. We just go ahead and let everybody do what they want to do, and we start to see the things that happen like you did out in Michigan. You have people just creating these juices, is what they're called, creating these juices, and they're not regulated. So on and against.
Representative Alaman, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just came through the hall. I wasn't jumped. I haven't talked to one of those lobbyists out there yet. I don't know them. I've talked to many people who own these little vape shops around Wyoming. They're all worried that they're going to go under. And I've got friends, as I said the other day, I have friends that have quit smoking cigarettes and are vaping. I'm not going to say that vaping is not harmful to you, but it's a whole lot better than than tobacco and what's in those cigarettes. And what I do myself is Copenhagen. There's actually asbestos in Copenhagen, I am told. So I'm going to say aye on the amendment, no on the bill. Thank you.
All right. Chairman Zwanitzer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just tangentially related for some of the newer members of our body, for a long time we had a doorman here who's also a cowboy poet who would read poetry every year. And the body's favorite poem was called Ambush Alley. And so those of us who've been here for several terms just kind of affectionately, colloquially call the lobby Ambush Alley. I don't think my good colleague meant any kind of disrespect. It's just kind of historically been called Ambush Alley, and perhaps that's not appropriate in the new legislature, but for those of us who've been around a while, it's not supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to be a term of endearment almost about how the process works.
Does the chairman have a comment on the amendment?
I would also just say we shouldn't use proper names on the floor.
Representative Harrelson, do you want to speak to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you guys just on and for the amendment. I'm at a point right now where I think you need to understand where I'm at. In my other life, I struggle with all these products. I struggle with their use. I struggle with them being in our society. But at the same time, I do start asking the question, are we putting the cart before the horse? Are we ready to roll this out? Do we want to protect people? Yes. Do we want to make sure they're not getting stuff they shouldn't? Absolutely. But we need to be careful that we don't create a bubble that we stick certain businesses into and everyone else out of, and we don't give them the opportunity to get in. That's not the role of government nor our place. And so I'll be honest with you, I'm on and for the amendment, but I'm definitely against the bill. We need to be very careful what we do in this realm, because we may open up a door that we don't intend to open up. So definitely on and for the amendment.
Representative Singh for your first time. Anybody else for their first time? Second time, Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. So it's kind of weird that we're talking about, this bill that was brought to us essentially by the largest national company that sells tobacco products, and that we should say, yes, it's for our safety, and then say that the people that are in the lobby are just a bunch of lobbyists trying to jump us, when that characterization couldn't be further from the truth. They aren't paid lobbyists. They are store owners that own small businesses in all of our communities, and they're trying to reach us when they only have so much power, while a large group can fund many paid lobbyists to lobby us to pass this bill, right? And so I think that characterization is a little incorrect, but I will say that the goal should be to increase safety for all of us, but it shouldn't be to protect one company over other companies. I want to have our stores have safe products, and I think we should regulate them. Let's do it through a committee process, not let's do it through a company-sponsored bill. So let's put this in the amendment so we're not playing favorites and saying just the largest market shareholder can be the one that is exempted and no one else. Vote aye on the amendment so we can make that even playing ground, and then make your decision on the bill later.
Chairman Brown, are you up for another shot?
Sure, why not, Mr. Speaker? I appreciate it, and I actually, more than anything, I just want to say, take a step back and eat some humble pie. And I just want to apologize that if my terms came out offensive, especially to those that have emailed me, as well as I'm sure every single one of you religiously over the past few days about this particular bill. My comments were not in any way, shape, or form meant to be derogatory about that. What I will say is, first of all, I'm sorry. So I'll state that right out front. But secondarily, what we're talking about with this is we're not trying to protect big tobacco. That is not at all why I signed on to this bill. Not at all. We do this for cigarettes. We do this exact same thing for cigarettes. And we don't have carve-outs for cigarettes. So we're going to create a carve-out because it's something new. And I heard through another person up here on the floor that, well, these are less harmful than cigarettes. They quit smoking, so they're less harmful. I think that's a very dangerous statement to be saying. I don't think we have the information at hand to be saying what the health effects of these vaping pens are 60 years down the road. We know dang good and well what smoking does. We don't have a clue. I can say that anecdotally, we have seen many, many issues with popcorn lung and those types of things. Don't want to get into that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the information that people do get when they're buying these products from your retailers that are afraid of going out of business. Nobody should be afraid of going out of business, ladies and gentlemen. I will state that again. Nobody should be afraid of going out of business if they're selling legal products. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Representative Singh, why don't you bring us home on this?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So some of the concerns that I've heard about this amendment is that it makes a special carve out for a particular group of individuals that were not fortunate enough to exist 4 years in the past. Because earlier in the bill, the paragraph before, it makes a specific carve out for electronic or vapor material that was marketed in the United States as of August 8, 2016. The folks in that particular pool, they were following the rules. They've put in an application with this administration in the federal government, and they have not yet received this authorization. But it's still a special carve out for these folks. The reason why I have this date in my amendment, May 4th, 2022, that was the deadline imposed upon these products to get their applications in. These entities were all trying to follow the rules and participate fairly in the market, but because this distinction is not made in the bill, they will see their entire market go up in vape, and I don't think that's right. So please vote aye in this amendment.
All right, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 107 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 107 has been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please stand. Less than 42. Nice call on that one. All right. Senate File 107 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 118.
Senate File 118, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Bighorn and domestic sheep relocation, federal action.
Senate File 118 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 132.
Senate File 132, sponsored by Senator Kolb. American Rescue Plan Act, Appropriations, Amendments 4.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move second reading amendment number 1 to the previously mentioned House bill. Remind me what House bill was. 132. Senate File 132. So ladies and gentlemen, we had this discussion yesterday. The amendment got divided, and then we had a whole lot of discussion on the first part, but not a whole lot of discussion on the second part. I think we were a little worn down. So I guess what I'm attempting to do is take the bill back to what our good colleagues down the hall did. Currently, in the bill as it came to us before the Standing Committee amendment, there is a priority put on the rest of the ARPA dollars going to two specific purposes: healthcare facilities that had already previously been given ARPA dollars, as well as water infrastructure projects. And then there were originally 3 and now 4 with mental health projects that were kind of equal as a second tier. What the Standing Committee amendment did is say all 6 categories are now basically equal. Obviously, as Chairman of Labor Health, I think it's important that we finish the projects that we started. They've had inflationary costs. And so really that amendment is just kind of a directive. Are we going to prioritize our local government projects and our healthcare facility projects before we prioritize mental health, highway funding, and the other 2 categories? I mean, highway funding is needed, but again, it's $3 or $4 million a mile. That can go a long way to finishing some of our previously approved ARPA projects who are dealing with inflationary costs. So I would encourage you to vote aye on the amendment and look forward to a spirited discussion.
Representative Walters for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. And folks, the issue here is just making sure that we're able to give our chief executive the most amount of flexibility possible so that we can get these dollars spent in an efficient way. Remember, the deadline is the end of December this year to have all of these dollars obligated. And by having these priorities in there, we're just eliminating some of his flexibility in getting these dollars spent. And so all the good committee number 2 was attempting to do was increase the amount of flexibility that is available for all of these dollars so that we can have them obligated by the end of this year. And that obligated is a big key word, and the timing on all of this, that's the whole key. And so I don't think the chief executive will have any issue trying to figure out how to prioritize these so that they can be spent as efficiently as possible, saving the state money, doing good work for all of us here in the state. But we need to give him that flexibility. So again, on and against the amendment, and please vote no.
Anybody else for your first time? Representative O'Hearn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I agree with the last speaker's sentiments. Our project was started in 2019, got refunded in 2022, and has suffered a lot of inflationary costs. And it went through the SLIB board, and the governors would put that as a priority. And I'm all in for this bill, but not this amendment.
Representative Heiner for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on and for this amendment. I don't think we're trying to hamstring our top executive officer. We're not tying his hands. We're just letting him know what our preferences are. It's our constitutional duty as a legislature to appropriate the funds and to direct that. That's why in our budget we have all these departments that we allocate money to. If we want to give the top executive officer more latitude, let's do away with all that and just do a bucket for the budget and give him $11 billion. Let him decide where to spend it. But that's not the way we do things. What we try to do is let the executive officer know what our preference is, and that's what this priority list is. It's not to hamstring him. It's not to tie a rope around his neck. It's just to say, we prefer that this money goes to infrastructure and then on down the list. He's not going to run out of projects before he runs out of money. There's plenty of opportunity to spend this money within the allotted amount of time. It's just a message we're sending to the top executive that we want to take care of our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Chairman Swanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I mean, it is just a decision of the body. I think there's going to be funding available and the chief executive won't have any project or issues spending it. The question is really, as the bill came over, they prioritized two things. On the bottom of page 23, Health and Human Services capital construction that are dealing with inflationary costs, and Water Development 1 and Water Development Account 2 projects that qualified for ARPA funds. So the question before the body is if you think that the current infrastructure projects for Health and Human Service capital construction and Water Development 1 and 2 projects should be funded first and higher prioritized than highways, local government matching funds, mental health, and the state budget departments asks, then you should vote aye on the amendment. If you think all 6 of those should go before the chief executive and they get to make the decision on where to fund each of those projects and those priorities, I mean, you should vote no on the amendment. Personally, and I testified to this in the interim as well, I think we should fund the projects for Water Development Account 1 and 2 and the existing health and human service projects that we started over the last 2 years to make sure they are fully completed before the money goes to other places. I don't know what our chief executive is thinking and how we might prioritize that, but I know we could spell it out in statute today and say the original ask, I think, in the bill from the other side was to prioritize those 2 above all else. So I'd continue to ask for your aye vote.
All right, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132 has been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. All right, thank you. All those opposed? Less than 32. So, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 132 has been adopted. Senate File 132 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. So now we've got some messages from the Senate. Is that what we want to do first?
Message 286. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with a like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 138. The Senate conferees are Senator Case, Chairman, Senator Landon, Senator Nethercott. Message 287. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 113, light and high-profile vehicle closures 2. Ayes 22, noes 9. Message 288. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did concur on House amendments to the bill listed below by the vote indicated. Senate File 14, State Fair Board, powers and responsibilities. Ayes 30, noes 1. Message 289. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 29, Cold Case Database and Investigations. Ayes 26, noes 1, excused 1. Message 290. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 58, Forensic Genetic Genealogy Pilot Program. Ayes 19, noes 11, excused 1. Message 292. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 90, Newborn Child Safe Havens, Age of Child. Ayes 31. Message 293. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 3, Property Tax Exemption for Long-Term Homeowners. Ayes 21, conflict 10. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
All right, do we have some enrolled acts? We're at that order of business of signing of enrolled acts. The first enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 43, being original House Bill 126.
House Enrolled Act 43 being original House Bill 126, an act relating to property, providing that daycare is a residential use of property for the purpose of restrictive covenances, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 43, being original House Bill 126. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is, congratulations Representative Yin on the last one. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 44, being original House Bill 3.
House Enrolled Act Number 44 being original House Bill 3, an act relating to taxation, establishing a tax exemption for long-term homeowners, providing a penalty for false claims, providing a sunset date, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 44, being original House Bill 3. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 45, being original House Bill 90.
House Enrolled Act Number 45 being original House Bill 90, an act relating to children, amending the age of newborn children who may be relinquished to a safe haven provider, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 45, being original House Bill 90. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Rodriguez-Williams. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 46, being original House Bill 58.
House Enrolled Act Number 46 being original House Bill 58, an act relating to law enforcement, establishing a pilot program for forensic genetic genealogy, DNA analysis, and searches as specified, providing grants, providing a sunset date, providing an appropriation, requiring rulemaking, and providing an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 46, being original House Bill 58. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 47, being original House Bill 29.
House Enrolled Act Number 47 being original House Bill 29, an act relating to the Attorney General, requiring the Division of Criminal Investigation to develop and maintain a cold case database, requiring law enforcement agencies in the state to provide cold case information to the division as specified, requiring rulemaking, requiring a report, authorizing funds for cold case investigations, providing an appropriation, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 47, being original House Bill 29. I have so signed. The next enrolled acts for our consideration are is Senate Enrolled Act Number 30, being original Senate File 103.
Senate Enrolled Act 30 being original Senate File 103, an act relating to marketing homemade goods, providing for the sale of homemade meat products as specified, providing a delayed effective date pending certification by the governor based on federal action, providing a definition, authorizing rulemaking, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 30, being original Senate File 103. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 31, being original Senate File 74.
Senate Enrolled Act 31 being original Senate File 74, an act relating to special districts, providing a process by which special districts required to dissolve for audit report noncompliance may reinstate the special district or cease the dissolution, specifying requirements for reinstatement, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 31, being original Senate File 74. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 32, being original Senate File 36.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 32, being original Senate File 36, an act relating to domestic relations, adopting the Uniform Child Abduction Prevention Act, authorizing the district court to order child abduction prevention measures when the evidence establishes a credible risk of abduction, providing a definition and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 32, being original Senate File 36. I have so signed. Next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 33, being original Senate File 8.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 33, being original Senate File 8, an act relating to compensation and benefits, authorizing volunteer firefighters, volunteer emergency medical technicians, and volunteer search and rescue persons to participate in the state employees and officials group insurance plan as specified, making conforming amendments, requiring rulemaking, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 33, being original Senate File 8. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 34, being original Senate File 14.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 34, being original Senate File 14, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals, authorizing the State Fair Board to make disbursements from its budget, authorizing the State Fair Board to make and execute contracts, removing the requirement that the Director of the Department of Agriculture be the chairman of any subcommittee created to execute the annual State Fair, allowing the Director of the Department of Agriculture to assign a designee to serve on the State Fair Board, authorizing rulemaking and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 34, being original Senate File 14. I have so signed. Next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 35, being original Senate File 113.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 35, being original Senate File 113, an act relating to highways, creating a penalty for violating signs and markers for closures to light and high-profile vehicles and other weight-based closures, requiring fines imposed to be paid by the driver of the vehicle at the time of the violation, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 35, being original Senate File 113. I have so signed. Okay, I think that clears that. Yeah, we'll go, let's do some third reading. So let's, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the consent list consisting of the following Senate files: Senate File 6, Senate File 19, Senate File 23, Senate File 24, 26, 27, Senate File 52, 53, 57, Senate File 73, 80, 96, 105, 114, 123, and 125 for your consideration.
Would anyone like to pull any of the bills off the consent list? Will a reading clerk please read the bills on the consent list?
Senate File 6, sponsored by Labor. Nursing home administrators, temporary licenses, an act relating to professions and occupations being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 19, sponsored by Education. Developmental preschool funding, an act relating to developmental preschool funding being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 23, sponsored by Corporations. Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement, an act relating to public utilities being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 24, sponsored by Corporations. Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans, an act related to public utilities being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 26, sponsored by Corporations. Special District Vacancies, an act relating to special districts being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 27, sponsored by Corporations. Special Districts Bond Elections Exception, an act relating to special districts being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 52, sponsored by Blockchain, Wyoming Stable Token Act, Amendments, an act relating to trade and commerce being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 53, sponsored by Senator Landon, 6th Judicial District, number of judges, an act relating to the judiciary being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 57, sponsored by Senator Furphy, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program, an act relating to public health and safety being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 73, sponsored by Senator Barlow, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility, an act relating to weapons being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 80, sponsored by Senator Barlow, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments, an act relating to environmental quality being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 96, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, Trusts and Bank Assets and Bankruptcy Clarification, an act relating to banks, banking, and finance be enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 105, sponsored by Senator Larson Dan, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, an act relating to the administration of government be enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 114, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, Contractor Licenses, Reciprocal Recognition Requirements, an act relating to city, county, state, and local powers being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 123, sponsored by Senator Kinski, Minor Name Changes, an act relating to Code of Civil Procedure being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 125, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, Parimutuel Wagering Activities Amendments, an act relating to gaming being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the House? The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrop, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strzok, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes on the consent list? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 6, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 19, are there any changes? Locke, aye to no. Davis? Penn? Aye to no. Haroldson? Aye to no. Ward? Aye to no. Allemand? Aye to no. Stivar? Aye to no. Bear? Aye to no. Strzok? Aye to no. Ottman? Aye to no. Winter? Aye to no. Knapp? Aye. Knapp? Aye to no. Heiner? Aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 50 aye, 12 no. As for Senate File 23, are there any changes? Sherwood, aye to no. Chestick, aye to no. Provenza, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Yin, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Swanitzer Dan, aye to no. Further changes? Storer, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 54 aye, 8 no. As for Senate File 24, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 26, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 27, are there any changes? Nyman, aye to no. Conrad, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Banks, aye to no. Tarver, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Obermuller, aye to no. Hornock, aye to no. Singh, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Slagle, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Ward, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Strzok, aye to no. Angelos, aye to no. Rodriguez-Williams, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Brown, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 35 aye, 27 no. As for Senate File 52, are there any changes? Nyman, aye to no. Conrad, aye to no. Zwanitzer Dave, aye to no. Allred, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Tarver, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Strzok, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Rodriguez-Williams, aye to no. Ward, aye to no. Harrelson, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Slagle, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 22 no. As for Senate File 53, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Conrad, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Strzok, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 56 aye, 6 no. As for Senate File 57, are there any changes? Nyman, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Banks, aye to no. Tarver, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Hornock, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Slagle, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Harrelson, aye to no. Ward, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Strzok, aye to no. Angelos, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Rodriguez-Williams, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Singh, aye to no. Further changes. Tarver, can you confirm? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 38 aye, 24 no. As for Senate File 73, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 80, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 96, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 105, are there any changes? Chestick, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 no. As for Senate File 114, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye. As for Senate File 123, are there any changes? Larson Lloyd, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 no. As for Senate File 125, are there any changes? Hornock, aye to no. Penn, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Ward, aye to no. Strzok, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 51 aye, 11 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate Files 6, 19, 23, 24, 26, 27, 52, 53, 57, 73, 80, 96, 105, 114, 123, and 125 have passed the House. We are now at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage, the regular list. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 42.
Senate File 42, sponsored by Minerals, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments, an act relating to public utilities.
We have an amendment, Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 42 and ask for your favorable consideration, members. So this is, what we have here is a bill that amends our energy portfolio standards. So those energy portfolio standards were enacted, I think, in 2019. It's something that I think we all understand what the purpose was, but the goal was essentially to have low carbon and dispatchable power. And so two of the things that are both low carbon and dispatchable, but didn't end up in the definition when we passed that bill in 2019 are nuclear power generation and hydroelectric generation. I think those are both feasible power sources that are both low carbon and dispatchable that can help each of our communities, as well as serve those portfolio generation standards. And with that, I'll ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you to resist this amendment. If you read the amendment as it is put in the bill, it completely changes this bill. The original Low Carbon Reliability Standards bill was to help our coal industry. That was the major push. The amendments bill, the bill in front of us that this amendment is on, was to help the industry a little bit, give them some leeway, help them recover some of their money, and do the things that the original bill didn't do. Is it a perfect bill? Probably not, but none are. This changes the bill to limit what will happen to low energy standards, to our coal industry. If you go to page 3 in the bill, and it's Starts on line 4 because this, page 3, line 4 starts it. But if you go to line 8, line 9, it specifically says coal-fired and new coal-fired. This changes that to give the power plants a choice to go to hydroelectric or to nuclear. We aren't going to build any more dams on rivers in Wyoming that I can think of. There just isn't enough room. And nuclear power, based on the original bill, if you go to that and you put one in, and you look at the 2 nuclear plants put in a state in the southeast corner, our ratepayers would be on the hook for 2%. Somewhere between $160 and $300 million would be charged directly to the ratepayers. Plus, I would consider natural gas to be a reliable low-carbon source. It doesn't mention that at all, so we're already ignoring one industry. So I'd ask you to resist this amendment. It just really makes a mess of the bill, in my opinion, and doesn't do much for the people of Wyoming at all.
Representative Conrad for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'd just like to reinforce the previous speaker's observation as well as we refer to, again, page 3. This whole amendment, or more importantly, let's say this amendment would detract from the overall goal of this, and that's to continue the coal-fired generation in our state. Adding hydroelectric, nuclear, et cetera, is completely out of bounds. This amendment is bad for the industry. It's bad for the state of Wyoming. I'd urge a strong no on this amendment.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the person who brought the bill 4 years ago, who put this language in, I guess at the time, I actually thought we could someday have hydropower. Nuclear would fit under those definitions. Putting the word "or" in here, I actually don't think it'll happen, but I don't think it makes a difference to the bill. So is it detrimental to the bill? Probably not. Is it helpful to the bill? Probably not, unless somehow we are going to build a hydroelectric dam in the state. But I think we're too far away from nuclear quite yet. But I don't think it's disastrous for the bill, as there are only very few that are reliable, dispatchable energy sources when we put this phrase in. Now that we're augmenting what that means, which is not what I put it in to mean 4 years ago, maybe it's out of line with the current way the bill and the legislation's going, but I don't think it was out of line with the original intent of House Bill 200 from 2020.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. You know, I don't think the intent is bad. We want to support industries in Wyoming, but we also want to support the ratepayers in Wyoming, right? And so my goal here is we can still fulfill those portfolio energy standards, but and support energy in Wyoming. It can just be different types of energy, and I think that can support many communities, but it doesn't force paying for nuclear power. What it does is it allows any of those choices to be the best choice, and whatever choice provides the lowest rate recovery, I think, is likely going to be one that a power company will choose to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be damming up a river. Could be a water storage project, right? So we could store energy and then let it out, do that hydroelectric power. So again, it's not there to harm anything. If anything, what will likely happen, even if the amendment passes, is that it'll still focus on that CCUS to fulfill this standard. However, all this does is provide that option that maybe sometime in the future, it'll be cheaper for us to still have that power generated in the state of Wyoming, but be also low carbon and dispatchable, just be in different types of energy, such as hydroelectric and nuclear generation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 42 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 42 has failed. Senate File 42 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Oakley.
Excused.
Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwaniter Dan. Zwaniter Dave. Speaker Summers. Oakley. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 39 aye, 23 no.
Senate File 42, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 42 has passed the House. Where's my Speaker Pro Tem? I think I'm going to get somebody to run this deal for a little while. It's good for him. You can run the ship.
The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 77.
Senate File 77, sponsored by Senator Nethercott. Homeland Defense, Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating. An act relating to Homeland Security being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, the First Amendment, here we go. Just a second here. I respectfully like to withdraw this amendment.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 77 is withdrawn. Senate File 77, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. I'm sorry. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff.
Aye.
Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwonitzer Dan? Zwonitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Yin, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 58 aye, 4 no.
Senate File 77, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 77 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 99.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Zwonitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. According to Rule 7-3, I'd like to lay back Senate File 83 for 1 day.
Absent objection, Senate File 83 is laid back 1 day. And we have Senate File 99? 90? The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 90.
Senate File 90, sponsored by Senator Guru. State-managed local government equity investment pool, an act relating to public funds, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Senate File 90. We have an amendment. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 and ask for your favorable consideration. So during a previous reading, I think it was on Committee of the Whole, we had an amendment that removed something that happened in the other chamber. What that amendment removed was a statement about ESG. So I've taken some time and spoken to the top 5 elected that's in charge of our treasury. That gentleman has a policy for ESG, and what this amendment does is takes that policy and puts it into the green books. So this is a good time for us to codify our stance on ESG. With that, I will ask for your favorable consideration.
Anyone for their first time? Representative Zwonitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I can appreciate the intent. It just seems odd to put A findings in this bill. And again, this is just for YO* 3. And so it might conflict with our other accounts, and just seems like if we're going to do it, we should maybe have a broader statement that's not part of this bill and this part of statute. It should be over all of our investing. So I appreciate what the good bring of the amendment is trying to do. I just think it's probably best as a bill or something more overarching in the future, instead of just having one of our investment accounts have this statement in it when the rest do not.
Anyone else for their first time? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment. Again, this is already being handled by the folks that do our investing, and by putting it in the green books, then it takes away flexibility. If things change when we're not in session, and now we have prevented certain activities. And again, this is for local government investments. This has nothing to do with state investments, only for local government, small districts, special districts. That is what this fund is all about. This has nothing to do with state investing. The only thing why the state is involved is these small districts would be allowed to invest through our chief investment officer of the state of Wyoming. And so again, on and against, this is a policy that's already been addressed, it's already been handled, and as things evolve rapidly in the investment world, I think we want to be able to evolve rapidly with them, and I think we're on top of it already, and it's unnecessary.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an interesting conversation that's been taking place over the last couple of years, really, as ESG has come and become a very important topic in the investment world. And then we've responded by saying, how do we protect our industries in the state who may be in opposition or who are on the the downside of what ESG policies are, and then how do we protect our people who are doing the investment where they are not influenced by us, who the legislative or the part of government that really in the investment world needs to be bifurcated or separated, segregated from influences of putting political influence on investments for the best return of interest. And so what we had last year, you will recall, is we were considering putting this into the Green Books, and we didn't. And then during the conference that we held at the base of the high mountains on the far western part of the state this year, where we had an investment conference, there was a question and answer period where that was brought up before those investment people representing our state. Do you want us to put into statute your investment policy or your investment policy? And what we heard at that time was a clear and loud no, that they like the flexibility to determine that amongst the 5 elected officials, who then have oversight at the bottom line on the investment policies of the state and for those that are interested. So I would just remind the body of some of the history that we've had over the last year. I think that there will always be of concern and of interest on the policies of those who manage our state funds, and certainly has influenced how the state has. And it's a good thing we've adopted the policies we have back when our current chief executive was the person over the investment, where we started handling more management of those funds so that we could stay on top of this. But I would encourage a no vote to allow that bifurcation or that separation between our political influence on the investment strategies and for the best in return for long-term investment of state funds and local funds.
Anyone else for their first time on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 9D? Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was talking to the director of the state that handles most of the retirements in the city, in the state for municipalities and teachers. And he said if you block our investment accounts from the bigger firms, even though some of them are ESG related, if you block those, you tie the hands of our investment people quite a bit. So I think that's, take that into account.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I seem to be hearing 2 different things, and I'd like a little clarification. I've heard, if I heard correctly, that it was already the policy of the investors to avoid ESG, and that just now I'm hearing that maybe we need to invest it there. I would just simply say this. This state has a tremendous amount of wealth. It's not always about the very most money you can possibly make. There is a fiduciary responsibility to the state. But at what cost?
Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Baer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was hoping to get a few more appropriators up here. I always try to get the majority of those to address my amendments, but we'll go on without them. So yes, this is tying the hands, if you will, because we make decisions like this all the time. What are the restrictions that this body wants to put on our investments? Are tying hands a good thing or a bad thing? I will point you all to the amendment, line 17, beginning on line 17 and finishing on line 18. Here's the crux of this amendment. Shall only be based on pecuniary factors. What that means is this policy means that the decisions by our investors have to be based on getting the best return. So we are not going to hurt our returns with this policy. What we are going to do is eliminate investments that are not based on getting the best return. Investments that are based on hurting our legacy industries. So with that, I will ask for your aye on.
We are voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 has failed. Division having been called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90, please stand. All opposed, please stand. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 has failed by a vote of 26 to 35. Senate File 90 having been read three separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
Aye.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Newsom? No to aye. Further changes. Nicholas? Aye to no? No. Nicholas? Aye. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 44 aye, 18 no.
Senate File 90, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 90 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 99. We have amendments.
Senate File 99, sponsored by Senator Bouchard. Chloe's Law, Children's Gender Change Prohibition, an act relating to public health and safety, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
No, we have amendments. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. Ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this adds language into this bill that's, and I'll just read it for you since it's fairly short, but it says, "Nothing in this article shall be construed to prohibit or restrict the psychological or psychiatric treatment of any diagnosis as defined by the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual." So members, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is a resource that mental health providers use to for codes to diagnose patients with various mental disorders, and so that's the resource they go to use when they're diagnosing patients. The reason why I bring this amendment to you here today is I feel like we're looking at this bill with blinders and saying, you know, the bill does this, we shouldn't be addressing the mental health piece. And that's not the case. I think we need to be addressing the mental health piece because this is a consequence of what we're trying to do with the bill. So, and you know, unintended consequences could be that doctors or mental health providers will not be able to will not treat patients in fear of losing their license because they're not going to be sure whether they're doing the right thing as far as prescribing certain medications for treatment that might be outside of gender dysphoria. So I'd just like to say that doctors need the flexibility to treat patients with testosterone and estrogen to treat other diagnoses that are not mentioned in this bill. And with that, I'll look forward to other discussion.
Representative Stivar, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment. We do not need to be putting the DMS number in the bill or in statutes. They're already on a rewrite of the DMS manual. And that thing gets updated every so often. So on and against.
Representative Western, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So I sign on to this amendment, I think really for a simple reason. And that's the scenario I'm imagining is, so let's say there is a minor that goes to a different state, has the gender affirming care there, comes back to Wyoming. There could be some kind of side effect or situation where, say example, they're going through a bout of depression and they need to be prescribed an antidepressant. While that's obviously not considered gender affirming care, I think that that's a scenario that certainly could happen. I think it has happened. And I think putting some language in there to ensure that those types of prescriptions can be made is appropriate.
Okay. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this amendment, it negates the whole purpose of this bill because that manual includes gender dysphoria. And in accordance with Rule 12-4, I ask for a recorded vote on this amendment.
And seconds for that? Okay. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So just a few seconds ago, we had a representative here from the capital city saying that we put in a number in this amendment, and I just want to make sure that we're reading this correctly. And it does say, as defined by the most recent edition of the DSM. So we're not going to be getting into the numbering, and if that gets updated to DSM 6, 7, whatever it turns out to be, our law stays compliant with that. So that's section 1 of my topic here. Section 2 would be on and for this amendment. And I just heard that this was the entire reason for this bill. And I was understanding during committee of the whole discussion that we were trying to prohibit puberty blockers and hormone therapy and sex changes from children underneath the age of 18, not psychological evaluations and the ability to have a psychiatric or psychologic evaluation and preventative maintenance or whatever you want to call it. I don't think we were in the process of trying to say we don't want our kids to have the availability to go see a therapist about their gender dysphoria. I also don't think that it's a situation for us to sit there and say, well, we don't want to have the DSM here because it doesn't fit what we say. The DSM is what we diagnose off of. It's not just fiction being thrown around out there, whether we like it or not. That's what diagnosticians utilize if they have somebody with gender dysphoria. So this amendment is, honestly, I think probably one of the ways that I can support this bill in a situation, because we're saying, hey, look, we recognize there's some mental health component to this, and we're not going to stop our children from getting mental health help with this bill. Adopting this amendment allows us to continue down that path. Defeating this amendment says you can't get your child the health care that they need, even if that child is battling this internally in their head. So they just end up committing suicide. Not good. On and for this amendment.
Representative Penn, are you at the microphone? Okay. Representative Trujillo.
Thank you. On and against this amendment, if we vote down this amendment, there are a couple more that are coming forward. Nowhere in this bill does it prevent psychological help. Nowhere does it prevent being diagnosed with anxiety and getting the assistance for that. Nowhere in the bill does it prevent being diagnosed with any other mental disorder and getting help for that. What we're trying to do is close loopholes for other means of gender dysphoria. I'm going to give you a couple examples here of, if we allow some of these loopholes to take place, side effects of what is going to be given to our children. Blood clots, gallstones, weight gain, acne, some word I don't even know, which means abnormal levels of fat in the blood, elevated liver enzymes. Another word, high concentrated of red blood cells, hair loss, balding. On that first word, dysphlemia, what that word means, the side effects to that are leg pain, problems walking, standing, chest pain, tightening, pressure in the chest.
Representative Trujillo, are you speaking?
I'm getting to my point.
Are you speaking to the amendment? Please speak to
These
the
are
amendment.
all symptoms of what's going to happen to the children if we allow loopholes to stay in this bill. I urge a vote against this. Thank you.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
First for second, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, once again, we're off in the weeds a little bit. This is a rehash of an amendment that we've already defeated on this floor. We're getting a little confused as to what this bill does and does not do. The bringer of the amendment said that this bill makes it so we can't address mental health. That is false. Please read the bill again. The point of this bill is to ensure that our kids don't get these life-altering treatments and instead get mental health that they need and deserve. This bill does nothing to prohibit their access to mental health. There is zero mention of mental health intentionally. This is the second year that this bill has been through the ringer. There has been no testimony by mental health providers saying that they're concerned that this could put a chilling effect on access to counseling. I want these kids to get counseling. That's the whole reason for this bill. This amendment is concerning for a few reasons. The mention of the phrase psychological or psychiatric treatment, again, that was in a previous amendment that we defeated. We have these phrases, but there are no definitions of them. What does that mean, psychiatric treatment? Because I assert to you that there are many that consider the use of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as psychiatric treatment. Is this amendment a loophole? That's a great concern that I have, potentially defeating the whole purpose of the bill. I would just quickly want to touch on the DSM mention here. DSM is not the only guide that we use to prescribe. In fact, it's mainly used by the mental health professions. Most family practice or frontline access that these kids are going to have probably never even cracked a DSM. What we generally use is what's called ICD, and those change as well, that we're currently in ICD-10. And so mentioning the DSM in this amendment potentially could have the opposite effect of your intent by limiting this, because as I just mentioned, if these kids need that critical access to go chat with their family care doctors, who will then refer them to a mental health professional who might then open up the DSM, we might be creating a situation where we're limiting the access of these kids because that critical time frame right initially, their diagnoses aren't included here. And so I would just please respectfully ask you to resist this amendment.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So I guess on and for, and again, would just say I just don't understand, and honestly, I'm surprised by the pushback on this. When every single person who has talked about this talks about the need for mental health, specifically in relation to this condition and what these young children are feeling and thinking. And through talking with pediatricians throughout the state, many, they have said the rates of depression, suicidality, and anxiety are through the roof for these kids that are dealing with this. And adding this and talking about this is what makes it seem comprehensive, that we are serious about addressing a mental health issue for these children, that we aren't just saying you can't do X and good luck. And so I will say again that we heard a very specific example from a young woman, and that she said, why is a mental health epidemic not being addressed with mental health treatment to get at the root causes for why female adolescents want to reject their bodies? It is important that we send the message that we recognize that these children are going through a very real, very difficult thing and need to get, and if they need to seek psychological or psychiatric treatment, that we support that. The idea that we need to define those, I think, is outlandish. Those people who practice in those fields know exactly what they are. I think we all know what they are. So the idea that somehow the Wyoming State Legislature needs to define those is not true. So with all of that, this is a simple step that makes the bill better on and for.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment, I appreciate the good sentiments from the representative from House District 33. I specifically don't want to pigeonhole providers to be limited to using just the DSM as a sole resource, as this amendment does. So on and against.
Anyone else for his or her first time? Representative Zwanitzer.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. First is, whether it's ICD-10 or the DSM, everything in the DSM has an ICD-10 code. So take that argument for what you will, but I think the DSM is still correct in the amendment. And I would take you back, the catch title of the bill is prohibiting physicians from performing procedures for children related to gender transitioning or gender reassignment. All we're doing in this amendment is making sure we're not trying to stop any treatments, any physical surgeries, any hormones. We're just saying they should also have access to psychological and psychiatric treatment. And again, whether or not these teenagers stay with the gender dysphoria and might transition as adults when they're of legal age, or they get this care and they say, hey, there's something else going on. And years later they say, whew, glad that didn't happen. I think we all should agree it's really important to make sure the kids get the help and the health care and the psychiatric care that they need during this time. So I don't think the amendment conflicts with the bill. I think we're just trying to put another statement from the Wyoming legislature on mental health, saying this is emerging, it's everywhere, and yes, we know it's social media driven, but there are kids who, for whatever, there are kids who need these services regardless of what happens later in life. And so also in support of the amendment.
Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Chairman, sorry, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. There we go. One thing, I mean, all this care and concern about children is great that it's coming out because it is an issue and it's being acknowledged. But what I want to say is all of this concern is wonderful, but normally in legislature, we are looking at a bill that has a title. This bill does not prohibit any of the things that you are talking about. What it does do is say that there will be no physical adjustments or cutting off or adding to or anything like that. These children will not be disfigured with things that cannot be reversed for the rest of their lives. And from the reports that I have read, they will be patients for the rest of their lives with having to have medications to help them as they grow, as they deal with all the problems that come with stopping progression during the formative years. So I would just say that all of the issues about mental health are, of course, important, but they have nothing to do with this bill. If we want to bring another one to say it's required that children are helped if they mention this or whatever, fine. But for this issue, this bill doesn't even talk about that. Thank you. I would vote no on this amendment.
Representative Crago for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First for a second.
Representative Wiley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. This amendment is not attacking this bill. It's not changing the title. It's not going to let these surgeries occur. It doesn't have these blockers in them for things that could last a lifetime. What this bill is doing is buying time. It's buying time for a young person to maybe make another trip around the sun and to say, hey, I'm having a hard time. Maybe I need some antidepressants. Maybe my local family doctor in a little small community that can't send you down to the the place where you can find more of a mental health. It's a bridge. That's all this is doing. It's trying to help buy time. We're talking antidepressant, folks, not hormone blockers or anything else. This does nothing but complement the bill.
Representative Washut for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If this only said psychological, I wouldn't have the heartburn with it. But because psychiatrists can also prescribe drugs, then we have a question about the definition of psychiatric treatment. If that psychiatric treatment is deemed by the psychiatrist to best benefit the child by prescribing puberty blockers, does this amendment open that door? And so that definition of what exactly are we talking about when we talk about psychiatric treatment? There's one way to think of it and say, well, we're talking about mental health drugs and mental health treatment, but it doesn't specify that. And that's the worry, I think, of people who support this bill, is does this language of psychiatric treatment create a loophole through which undermines the bill? So on it against the amendment.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think interesting conversation, and I think the previous speaker, I think, brings up some flaws in the bill where we don't have a clear definition. And I've heard from previous speakers how this doesn't impact a mental health provider, and that they shouldn't be concerned because nowhere in there does it talk about or prohibit mental health. But in the definitions, it talks about a healthcare provider, and that means a person other than a physician who is licensed, certified, and otherwise authorized by Wyoming law to provide or render health care. And mental health is health care. They are healthcare providers. And so I think there is justifiably a concern that psychiatrists or those providing health care through mental health would stand back and have pause in what their ability to render services to people doing this transition is. And so I think there certainly is some validity for the concern and would support the amendment.
Anyone else? Representative Nyman.
First for a second.
Representative Slagle.
First for a second as well.
Anyone else for his or her first time? Anyone for their second time? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next bill.
So I wanted to just touch on a couple of things that were said. One was that these kids are going to kill themselves if we don't do this. That's the reason for the bill, is the concern. These kids need mental health help. That's the point, because we have been skipping that step. If you have any involvement in any of the detransition world, you hear story after story after story, or you chat with parents who are in this situation and they're saying, wait a second, we're not even being offered counseling. We're just saying, okay, your child now says that he's a girl. Let's go with that. We're going to immediately affirm, and we're going to start down that road. And parents are feeling blindsided. And patients at this age especially, we're talking about minors. They don't have the mental capacity to make these lifelong decisions, and they just get swept down without the mental health. That is the key component. That is the reason for this bill. We talked about how there's 8 European countries who've reversed course. They were on the train to provide the blockers and the cross-sex hormones and the surgeries, because they were saying the research shows that this saves lives. But then, as we've previously discussed on this floor, when you actually look at the research, the real research of good quality, which there isn't that much of, and it doesn't go very far, it doesn't follow out, they're finding, gosh, we're really not doing the right thing. Because what is being shown is that these kids have higher rates of suicide after. In fact, one study showed that following genital surgery, transgender patients were 4.9 times more likely to attempt suicide and 19.1 times more likely to have died from suicide. We don't want our kids to be in this situation, of course. This is tough for children and for families. This amendment has concerns. There's potential for loopholes. We don't want loopholes. We don't want loopholes. We want to save our kids. We all have that same goal, I'm certain of that. The question is, does this bill accomplish what we need it to accomplish? If you're concerned about the fact that it may not, please read it again with those questions in your mind. This does not prevent you from prescribing antidepressants. It doesn't touch on ability to access mental health care. The concerns that we've heard from mental health care providers have not been, I'm not going to feel comfortable providing care anymore. We have not been hearing that. Please vote no on the amendment.
Representative Trujillo for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Guys, I have so much empathy. I was a teenager once, and hormones are crazy. And the thought of not fitting in with my classmates, with my neighbor kids, those are real, deep, concerning feelings for teenagers. And we're catching them at their most desperate moment in life. And what we're doing right now with this amendment is giving a possibility to have these kids be victims of pharmaceutical, big pharma. That's what we're doing. The side effects that I was listing earlier will be lifelong. There's even one side effect, one of those words that I mentioned, is a rare blood disease, which gives them 14 years of living after diagnosis. Those are things we need to consider when we're going to try and allow loopholes to be in this bill. Again, on and against this amendment.
Representative Swanitzer Dan for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Generally strongly pushing back on the last two comments, right? We're not skipping any steps in Wyoming. We haven't skipped any steps in Wyoming. We have not had any of these surgeries in Wyoming. When you ask anyone in the medical community, far and wide, no one has been able to say we have yet had any of these surgeries in our state. I'm not saying we want them, but to say that somehow we're just jumping in and mutilating children is not the case. We are better than that in Wyoming. We have had a limited number of adolescents who are on some puberty blockers, and I've met some of them. I'm not sure how many of you have met them. Have you talked to them, heard about their experiences, understand their lives, understand the conversations they had with their parents, right, and their doctors? These aren't things people just jump into, at least not in Wyoming, at least not in the cases of the two places that I'm aware of who have prescribed these and the kids that are getting them. And you can certainly go meet those kids. We've, kind of nicely asked them to stay away because we're not so sure this is a safe place for some of them to visit, with these conversations going on. And I appreciate that we keep bringing up these studies from Europe, which is shocking because every other study we've had from Europe, usually we've disavowed. But I've looked at 3 of them, and they're not peer-reviewed. And so we can talk about science and studies and all these things, but I haven't found one that was peer-reviewed, and I am aware a couple of countries in Scandinavia have pushed back and limited, which is great. But again, it hasn't happened here. And so when we talk about that is creating loopholes, this isn't creating loopholes. We're just making a statement that these kids deserve access to psychological care, psychiatric care in many cases, because when you do have a youth who is dealing with these issues and they usually say they're suicidal, right? Whether or not they truly are, that's kind of the next claim. They just can't handle all of these emotions that we have as teenagers. They don't go see a psychologist. They have to go see a psychiatrist. And we have a limited number in Wyoming. So in many cases, in our part of the state, we have to ship them down to Denver. And they get thorough examinations. So I don't think we're creating loopholes. I don't think we're stopping anything. We're just saying these kids deserve care. And that I encourage you to vote for the amendment.
Representative Stivar for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You got to remember, this bill is about surgeries, not mental health. I was looking at the uncorrected copy of this amendment, but on and against.
Majority Floor Leader Nyman for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. We are trying desperately here to allow these kids to have every opportunity to grow up. I've read and read and read as I've read through this. I'm one of the co-sponsors on this bill. I don't see any prohibition in this bill for mental health. There's no denying that. It's available. It's there. We talked about the dollars that we're spending currently in Wyoming and the dollars that we're potentially going to spend if the bill comes through. And another issue that concerns me is that I'm at the point now where I don't ever say never in Wyoming. Because we heard that last session. That doesn't happen here. And the folks that are dealing with some issues down in the southwest corner of the state, they went right home and walked into a firestorm. And so the whole idea of this is that we're trying to be preemptive. I don't want to wait for it to happen here. I want to be proactive. I don't want to be reactive. Reactive, you're on your heels and you're struggling to try to catch up. We're on the front end of this, folks. Thank God that we don't have this to deal with potentially here in Wyoming, if that's true. But we don't want it to start happening and then try to have to pull it back in and let that horse, once it's out of the barn, you can't get him back in. But again, I don't see anything in this legislation that prevents or prohibits mental health for anybody that is struggling with these issues at all. So on and against the amendment.
Representative Ottman for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Just a couple things to bring before the body. First off, we do not want anything to happen to the children. Working in the school district for 15 years, I saw children from the time they got off the bus until they left to go home again, and all things in between, good days, bad days, and the other. Going through the issues that we are going through in society, and also going through a couple years of isolation and so many other things, children are definitely delicate. Our families are at risk in so many ways. And I will say, serving on Labor Health, or the department, I will say, the committee for those that take care of our, working and health, we were told from the department that takes care of, or the association that takes care of some teachers, and also from doctors, a daughter-father team here in Cheyenne, and also another one from the northwest part of the state, that at that time there were no abortions. And they were very, very, very adamant about it. They said, we don't know what you're talking about. That does not happen in Wyoming. Well, we know now that they are very proud of the fact that they were going on, and that there are reports to show that now. The thing that I will say about this not going on in Wyoming is not true, because it is going on in Wyoming. It is going on in Wyoming in physicians, under physicians' care. We need to protect these children from lifelong mistakes. This is talking about physical impairment. This is talking about physical changes that are not natural. These things are not good. To postpone them until an adult decision can be made is for the benefit of everyone. Please vote for the bill and against this amendment.
Representative Hornock for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. The difficulty, I think, in this amendment is just tying ourselves to the DSM. So that's one difficulty. And then when you have psychologists, they can prescribe medication, and so what are they going to prescribe? If we tie ourselves to the DSM, that's a moving target, essentially. I don't know if I have a dictionary app on my phone. That changes all the time. It's very interesting to see that change. But just so you know, there is another amendment that I think won't tie us to the DSM. It takes care of
Representative Hornock,
caring for these
Representative
children.
Hornock, please speak to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the issue is to care for these children, and I think that we can still do that even by not voting on this amendment. If you check that out, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think just a little point of clarification. About three speakers ago, it was stated to body that this bill is about surgery and not about anything else, and that's just not correct. If it were just about surgery, we would be on a clear and easier path. This has taken into consideration nurses who could lose their license. This is about pharmacists who fill a doctor's prescription that could lose their licenses. And this is much broader than just surgery. So just to correct that and think that having this in place, this will help give definition to healthcare providers on who's allowed to treat patients and who's not in these circumstances is helpful and would support the amendment.
And to the Representative Slagle, I don't see that you spoke the first time. You did? Did you? Okay, for your second time. My mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. As I look at this amendment, I would urge a no vote on it because it talks about restricting very things that the bill it's amending says we will do or restrict. And so we got a conflict between the amendment and the bill. I would urge a no vote on this amendment.
To the sponsor, Representative Larson, JT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, and thank you all for the lively discussion on this. I encourage you to strongly consider voting aye on this amendment. As previous speakers have said, this bill is truly, when you boil it down, it's a mental health issue, and we need to have a mental health component in the bill. In my opinion, this does not create a loophole. This just gives the providers the ability to do their job. And the reason for this bill, like speakers have said before, this is for mental health. So I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
We are voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? No. Allred? No. Andrew? No. Angelos? No. Banks? No. Bear? No. Berger? No. Brown? No. Burkhart? No. Byron? Aye. Chadwick? Aye. Chestick? Aye. Clauston? Aye. Conrad? No. Crago? Aye. Davis? No. Eklund? No. Haroldson? No. Harshman? Harshman? Heiner? No. Henderson? Aye. Hornock? No. Jennings? No. Knapp? No. Larson Lloyd? Aye. Larson JT? Aye. Lawley? No. Locke? No. Nyman? No. Newsom? Aye. Nicholas? Aye. Nemec? Aye. Northrup? Aye. Oakley? Aye. Obermuller? Aye. O'Hearn? Aye. Olson? No. Ottman? No. Pendergraft? No. Penn? No. Provenza? Aye. Rodriguez Williams? No. Sherwood? Aye. Singh? No. Slagle? No. Smith? No. Stith?
Aye.
Storer? Aye. Strock? No. Stivar? No. Tarver? No. Trujillo? No. Walters? Aye. Ward? No. Washut? No. Western? Aye. Winter? No. Wiley? Aye. Yin? Aye. Zwanitzer Dan? Aye. Zwanitzer Dave? Aye. Speaker Summers?
Excused.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 28 aye, 33 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99 has failed. We have third reading amendment number 3, Representative Penn. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I move third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 99 and ask for your favorable consideration. Same amendment, better language. Please vote aye.
Representative Swanitzer, for your first time.
Thank you. I would say it's much worse language, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So the definition of psychotherapy, should you look on our statutes, all talks about alleviating disorders. It basically presupposes you have a mental disorder, and psychotherapy is there to cure it. It is to deal with conflicts, to modify your behaviors that interfere with effective emotional, social, or intellectual functioning. And so I certainly don't want to say that every young person who is dealing with gender dysphoria is somehow in need of professional help to alleviate their mental disorders. So certainly not the term I would use, and would strongly ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
I appreciate the effort, but what I'm trying to understand from the sponsor of this amendment is what's developmentally appropriate and how do we regulate that?
Anyone else for their first time? To the sponsor. Question. Question being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment, third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 99, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The chair is in doubt. Those in favor, please stand. Those opposed? Yeah, more than 15. Okay, so apologize for my hearing. Okay. Third reading amendment to Senate File 99 has failed. We have another amendment. Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move third reading amendment number 4, Senate File 99, just trying to work on this language. So you can see it, it just filed here, but nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit a minor from receiving mental health treatment, provided that such treatment shall not include any treatments prohibited by subsection B3 of this section. I think brought in response when I heard testimony on the first amendment that failed from the good representative from the center of the state that perhaps psychiatric treatment could include these medications. And so this refers to all those medications and treatments. So trying to find a way, I mean, you know, I think we're all here because of our personal experiences so I think it's important to make it crystal clear. I don't think the bill doesn't prohibit any mental health treatment. I don't think it does, but I think this is kind of a belt and suspenders approach to let our citizens know that it for sure doesn't prohibit that mental health treatment is encouraged and a part. So appreciate your debate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone for the first time? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, we're up against definitions. The last one was thought to not be good because of definitions. This one has mental health treatment as a definition, and I haven't found that in statute. So consider that. I would request.
Representative Larson, JT, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. According to Rule 12-4, I'm calling for the ayes and noes.
And do we have seconds for that? Anyone else for their first time? Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this amendment works, and so I'd like to hear more detail about which definitions seem to be problematic here. I think this one works.
We are on third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 99. Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time? To the sponsor. Question being called. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Aye. Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
Aye.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Excused.
Excused.
Are there any changes? Allemand? Aye. To no. Angelos? Aye. To no. Provenza? Tarver? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 36 aye, 25 no, 1 excused.
Third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 99 has been adopted. We have one final amendment. It's third reading amendment number 2. Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I hereby withdraw my third reading amendment number 2.
Senate File 99, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
Aye.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Excused.
Excused.
Are there any changes? Larson Lloyd? Aye. To no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 55 aye, 6 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 99, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 99 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 109.
Senate File 109, sponsored by Senator Beitman. Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act, an act relating to the protection of constitutional rights being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I move House Amendment 1 to Senate File 109. So, third reading amendment. What this does, I believe when we had this on general file, on page 5, we added to the exceptions for this, that we added parole, probation, we added the wildlife statute, and we added Title 25. So what this amendment does is it expands that to adding folks that are legally incompetent, that have been committed to a mental institution, anyone who is an alien who is illegally or unlawfully in the state of Wyoming, anyone who has been dishonorably discharged from any branch of the armed services, anyone who has been convicted of a crime listed under these statutes, which is basically domestic assault and domestic battery. So just adding those exceptions in 2 places, on page 4 after line 19 and on page 5 after line 7. So I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Representative Stivar, are you speaking to third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109? No. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Since I am about 0-20 on amendments with asking for aye votes, I will ask for an aye vote on this amendment. I think this is just a little bit unnecessary is all. These are things that are specifically in state statute that are crimes already. So, you know, it's really the body's call, but I really don't think this is necessary. These are things that are crimes, they will be prosecuted, and the chips will fall where they may. So really don't think this amendment is necessary, but I ask for your aye vote.
Representative Stivar for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment, just because you're dishonorably discharged from the military, it could be because you're a slacker and you didn't clean your room, or back-talking an non-commissioned officer. You know, the only time that you would have a felony conviction if you had a court-martial. So, on and against.
Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time? To the sponsor, Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I call the question.
Question being called. We are voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. I apologize, folks. My hearing just isn't great. Thank you. All those in favor, please stand. Okay, and then does that count me? Okay, so 30 with me, okay. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 has been adopted by a vote of 30 to 28. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 109 and ask for your favorable consideration. And so we've had this debate off and on this session. But what this amendment does is it removes the findings, deletes the findings. So if you go to the bill, and if you go to page 2, there's declaration of authority, which are basically just legislative findings. And there are 2.5 pages of legislative findings. And I would just submit that the practice is not to put legislative findings in the bills. And we've heard that from numerous times on this floor. And we've removed those findings numerous times on this floor. So I'd ask for your aye vote.
Representative Haroldson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd push back a little on that. We don't always. There have been times we definitely have left findings in there. And in this situation, in the case of what this bill does, I definitely think they have a place there. I think we would probably be, I don't think we'd be wise to remove these in this case. So I would be on and against this amendment.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to, Speaker Pro Tem, I'm going to push back as well. And especially on the amendment, and I think this is important, where line 3 of the amendment, it says you're deleting authority. And I know that's part of the legislative findings, but we're deleting part of the legislative authority when it comes to this particular bill, okay? And then if you look on page 3 of the bill, line 8, it says, the legislature further declares that the authority for this statute is provided by the findings in 68406. There are legislative findings specifically related to gun laws within our state statutes. This adds to them. So I think this is necessary when it comes to this particular subject. And I'm going to, according to Rule 12-4, I'm going to ask for the ayes and noes on this one.
And do we have 5 seconds? 2 seconds. Plenty of seconds. Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time? To the sponsor.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So Wyoming Statute 6-8-406 actually has findings, and it has to do with Second Amendment rights. So this language is almost completely duplicative of what that statute already says. But once again, do we need these legislative findings? And what is not in these legislative findings is what the Wyoming Constitution says. The Wyoming Constitution says that the law, the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and anything that we do that's contrary to the U.S. Constitution is basically null and void. Parts of this bill do exactly that. So I'm in favor of the amendment.
We are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 109. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestic? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? I'm sorry, repeat. Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? I'm sorry, repeat. Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
Aye.
Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Excused. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 32 aye, 28 no, 2 excused.
Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 109 has been adopted. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would move third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 109 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is a fairly simple amendment, ladies and gentlemen.
Chairman
Did
Nicholas,
I say that right?
Chairman Nicholas, Senate File 109?
Senate File 109, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
So as I mentioned a little earlier, Wyoming Constitution Article 1, Section 37 reads, "The state of Wyoming is an inseparable part of the federal union, and the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land." That's what our Constitution says. And so what this amendment does, it removes on line 4, or page 4, line 11, a reference to the federal statutes and rules. Rules, by the way, are the law of the land, and federal statutes are the law of the land. And the federal laws are supreme when they're addressed in that fashion. So I'm endeavoring to make this constitutional and comply with the Wyoming Constitution. So in 2 different locations we do that, and it just removes references that this law supersedes any federal statute or rule.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So this kind of guts the bill. In Wyoming, are we gonna stand up for ourselves when it comes to gun laws, or are we gonna let the federal government figure out what they're gonna do for us and we abide by their statutes? You could have on the federal level any law passed that restricts our gun rights in Wyoming, our Second Amendment gun rights. And if we pass this amendment, we have to abide by those statutes or laws. So that is what we're dealing with here. I don't think this is a good amendment because this basically guts the bill. Our effort is to, it may come someday, we have to push back against the federal government on this stuff. This is where we stand. As a result of this, again, I'm going to call for the ayes and noes according to Rule 12-4.
And we have seconds. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Federal law is not the Constitution. They are not the same thing. Occasionally, the federal government makes laws that are not constitutional, and they are later overturned by the courts. Thank you.
Representative Alamand for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Section 24, right to bear arms, the right of citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves, and the state shall not be denied.
Representatives Wanitz or Dan for your
Thank
first
you,
time.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I think the last speaker just proved the point, right? Why, if we have this in the Wyoming Constitution, why do we need to have federal statute and rule? And yes, I appreciate Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and then federal laws, and then the state constitution, and then state laws. This is actually a question on my midterm, which opened today. So if any of my students are listening, hope you get this one right.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment. Essentially, it guts the bill. They want to take our land. Now they want to take our guns. And yes, if there's any students out there listening, don't let the feds do it. On and against.
Representatives Wanitz or Dave for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Ladies and gentlemen, every day in this body, one of the first things that I do when I stand up and look at the flag there, I pledge my allegiance. To whom? Think about that. We, all individual states, make up the United States. So, you know, life isn't always good, but I would suggest that that is the first priority that we stand up and state for every day.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Many of you, in fact, all of you and I swore an oath to the Constitution. There are volumes and volumes and volumes of federal laws and rules and regulations, and many of them step far beyond the limits of what the Constitution allows. That oath that I took several times in my life, it doesn't wear out. There's no end to it. What we're doing here is pushing back and stating, in fact, there are many federal laws, rules, and regulations that are, in fact, unconstitutional, and we're pushing back. And it's high time we did.
Representative Haroldson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we were to do this on all of our statutes in the state of Wyoming, we'd be in trouble. Because we just talked about it. We've got a conversation happening on land in this state where we're pushing back. The truth of the matter is this: we are part of the United States. We are one of the states in the union, and every single one of us do every morning stand up and say that pledge to that flag. But at the end of the day, what we see coming out of that portion of our country and that leadership group of our country, we don't agree with. I think we could almost all agree with that. And so why would we tie our rights to that? Why would we tie the rights that were given to us by God to that? And so I think this is definitely not a policy that we want to choose, because if we choose this, where does this end? At the end of the day, where are we going to allow ourselves to go? So I would very strongly push back on this one. Set this bill aside. Let's just talk about this conversation. This is something that if we do this, anything that they do on that level, we are then accustomed to or attached to, and that's definitely not where we want to be as the state of Wyoming. So definitely on and against this amendment.
Anyone else for their first time? Anyone else for their second time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Strongly against this amendment. There is really no reason for us to be here, to have spent so many hours in this room, to work so many bills, to discuss so many topics, if we're just going to abide by federal statute at every level. I do not think that is why we're here. We're here to figure out Wyoming. We're here to figure out what works here in Wyoming. urge you to resist this amendment and vote no. Thank you.
Representative Ward for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add to my preceding comments that federal laws are not supreme simply by virtue of being federal. Federal laws are only supreme if they conflict with state law and there is constitutional authority for those laws. The supreme law of the land is the U.S. Constitution.
To the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas. Okay. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Brown?
Excused.
Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Excused. Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
No.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Excused. Are there any changes? Allred, aye to no. Burkhart, aye to no. Klauston, aye to no. Berger, aye to no. Provenza, aye to no. Brown, excused to no. Larson Lloyd, aye to no. Nicholas? Are you up? Nicholas, aye to no. Nicholas, aye. Henderson? Henderson, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote? Vote closed. 10 aye, 50 no, 2 excused.
Third reading amendment to Senate File 109 has failed. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would bring third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 109 and ask for your aye vote. So this is a fairly important one, ladies and gentlemen. What this amendment does, it removes references to decisions by judicial courts and judicial findings. Never in my history of being in the legislature have we taken any action that reverses or limits the power of our courts to make decisions and to make findings based upon the facts presented in front of them. Never. And so the general concept, what this bill does is we're telling court judges how they have to rule on a particular case, literally. So, on and in favor of the amendment.
Anyone for their first time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, same argument that we just had, frankly. We do have 3 independent branches of our government, and one is us. One is us. How independent are we going to remain? Okay? This is important. It is important, just like the good bringer said. So because it's that important, again, I'm going to call for the ayes and noes on this according to Rule 12-4.
And we have seconds. Representative Rodriguez-Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment, I would argue to the good representative from District 7 that we've never had such radical ideologies trying to change this country. And it's time for Wyoming to stand up, act like a sovereign state, and not allow guns to be taken from their people. On and against.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, the resistance to this amendment is really baffling to me. It's saying that the third branch of our government shouldn't have the authority to decide what is or is not constitutional. I think that if we're going to say that, we're going to say that the courts can't actually decide whether or not that they can determine whether a law is federally or statutorily within our state constitutional, and that we are overriding that authority with our legislative authority. We're going down a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous path. If we're going to say we're not trusting the courts to do their appointed job. And so I think if you're going to vote no on this amendment, you're attacking the third branch of government. And I would recommend that you don't do that and vote aye on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Representative Provenza for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, you know, it may shock you as a member of the minority party, I do not support red flag laws. In part because I think they violate due process. I want to support this bill. If we take out the courts and we get in the way of other due process of the legitimacy of our government, then I'm not sure I can support the bill, and I want to. So, yeah, I mean, I on and for the amendment and hopefully for the bill.
Majority Floor Leader Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Just for discussion here, we've been dealing with some issues here in the last of my tenure in the legislature, and we've talked about findings and the desire to either have them or not have them. So I actually had a conversation with a former Supreme Court Justice of this state. And I said, do you want that in there? Because I've been told we don't want to find findings in legislation. We don't want to be telling you guys what to think. And it is. It's on the amendment. It's about whether or not this is a good amendment or not. I'm against the amendment.
Please do.
So he said we desire and we would look for those because it shows legislative intent. He said that helps us to know what the intent of the legislature was and clarifies it for us. It doesn't tell us what we should do or should not do, but he said it shows legislative intent. He said we're not against having findings. So on and against the amendment.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. On and against the amendment. We all know the basics. We make the laws. The executive branch executes the laws. Judicial branch judges whether or not the law is being obeyed. Recently, the judicial branch has taken a liking to legislating from the bench. This is pushback on that.
Representative Zwanitzer-Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I was also at the talk where our former Chief Justice mentioned about findings, but that was certainly not in relation to this bill or this issue. And before we broadcast all of our things forever to be recorded, I'd also push back a little bit about that this is the most radically ideological time in U.S. history. You know, we could certainly mention 10 things, let's start with slavery, that might have been a little more radical in their ideology. And the truth is, we actually have friendlier gun laws to the state of Wyoming than really at any point in American history, right? After the 2010 DC versus Heller case, after McDonald versus Chicago, I mean, if you're following gun rights for states, this is as good as it's been throughout American history. Not saying that it's great, not saying we can't keep pushing back, but I just want to make sure we have informed statements on this body of where we are, where we can go, and where we've been, and kind of stop some of the hyperbole and just have a legitimate discussion on the law. This one on this amendment is on judges and the judicial branch and the interrelation of what this body does via what the judicial branch decides in the separation of powers. And so I think it's a perfectly reasonable amendment. I would hope you do too. But I did want to mildly push back against some of the comments made on this floor. It does seem like everybody's a little heightened when it comes to bills on guns, which is appropriate because it symbolizes kind of everything when we talk about our freedom and our rights. Somehow firearms is somewhat the personification of all that we hold dear for our liberty, which I appreciate. But I also appreciate the discussion on this floor not getting out of control and staying, true to the facts. So, on in favor of the amendment.
Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Please keep in mind, a vote against this amendment is not a vote against our courts, okay? That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing in voting for this amendment is not allowing the courts into a position where they would enforce red flag laws. Everything else is not in question here when it comes to the courts, okay? We're specifically dealing with what the courts would say when it comes to stripping guns from Wyoming citizens. Now, this bill is about due process. This bill has a lot of due process factors in it. We talked earlier about whether you're convicted of crimes, whether it's, I think we're at a nonviolent felony and a violent felony. Those people aren't allowed to own guns still. Those are court-related actions, okay? So we're not going against our third branch of government. We're telling them that when it comes to stripping Second Amendment rights from citizens who are allowed to own guns per our Constitution, and there's a lot of caveats in this bill when it comes to those people, okay? But the people that are allowed to own guns, you've gone too far. You can come no further. We're drawing that line with our judicial branch. And I think that is an important statement to make. I urge a no vote on this amendment. Thank you.
To the sponsor, Representative Nicholas.
So ladies and gentlemen, this is, I think you need to take a deep dive into this bill. If we don't pass this amendment, and if by chance a district court would rule contrary to this law, then you as a citizen could sue the court, fine him, and have him pay $50,000, and you could defund the court. That's what this bill does. And we're going to come that, if we don't take the judges out and the rest of this bill goes into effect, that is in effect what we are doing. On in favor of the amendment.
We are voting on House Third Reading Amendment Number 4 to Senate File 109. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? No. Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? No. Bear? No. Berger? Aye. Brown? No. Burkhart? Aye. Byron? Aye. Chadwick? Aye. Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman, excused. Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
Aye.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? All read, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 21 aye, 40 no, 1 excused.
House third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 109 has failed. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 109 and ask for your favorable consideration, ladies and gentlemen. So this, if you go to page 6 and read C, to understand what, this deletes that paragraph. So what does that paragraph do? This provides that if you use any state dollars or federal dollars of any kind to implement laws of the federal government, which are constitutionally protected, that you can defund any violation of this law. And so you take away state funds, you take away federal funds. If you end by passing a law which is contrary to law, I just respectfully submit that that makes no sense. It literally makes no sense.
Representative Hornock, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So deleting this paragraph, and again, we're very narrow here, specific to enforcement of red flag laws, of some agency being told to go strip a gun out of the hands of a law-abiding citizen. So what we're saying is that by leaving this paragraph in there, we're saying you cannot weaponize our government agencies to come do your dirty work, to come and strip guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. And I think this is an important part of the bill, because I don't think our agencies want to be put in a position where they have to abide by some federal statute, federal regulation, federal whatever that says, hey, you need to go take the guns out of these people's hands. I don't think our agencies want that. I think this gives our agencies actually a little bit of cover to say, I can't. State statute says I can't enforce red flag laws because that's a law-abiding citizen. He deserves the right to own a gun. So this is an important piece of legislation here. Let's not weaponize our agencies against our citizenry. So again, according to Rule 12-4, we're going to go for the ayes and noes on this.
And do we have seconds? We do. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Speaker Pro Tem.
On and against the amendment as well. You know, I'm sitting here reading these in, and there's one after another, and, you know, I feel like the intent of my good seatmate is to try to make a bill that he's more comfortable with. But as I look at the language that we're striking here, I read it exactly as the other fellow representative here from the city that says, you can't weaponize any agency, whether it's going to be a federal agency or anything along those lines. You cannot weaponize this to violate due process. And that's all we're doing with this bill in general. There's a lot of words here, but we're basically saying, you don't get to take my guns. You don't get to take away anything. There's no other amendment in our Constitution that you get to take away if you have a mental health issue, right? And so all we're saying with this particular piece of language that's in here is, if you do this, we're going to yank the money away from you that you had been getting because you're straight up violating the state law and you're violating the Constitution and due process for gun rights. So I disagree very heavily. I think the bill is actually really, really well written this time around. And I think we have a pretty good understanding of what we're trying to do here in this. Trying to clean it up, fantastic. Try to clean it up the way you need to, but you know, we're kind of beating a dead horse at this point. So on and against. Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against. Executive orders are not laws.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. And I definitely thank the good representative from District 9 for those words. They were in essence what I would like to say, but I want to take it just a step farther back and look at this. The entire problem with the red flag law concept is that it seeks to usurp the process. We've had a lot of talk about process during this session. Things are set up the way they're set up, so we have a balance of forces. We have a balance between the three branches of government. We have process. We have the way things are supposed to go. This red flag law concept is built on emotion. It's built upon what could happen, what might happen. Oh my golly, we've got to do something about that. And we step aside from the rule of law, and without the rule of law, we are nothing.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the good bringer of this amendment that part of the amendment, or part of the section he's trying to delete, states, nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit Wyoming officials from accepting aid from federal officials to enforce any Wyoming law that is not in conflict with this act. So again, federal laws are not supreme just by the fact that they're federal, and this is very narrow. This bill is narrow in its scope, on and against the amendment.
Representative Yen for your first time.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, first for a second.
Anyone else for their first time? Nobody? Anybody for your second time? Representative Yen.
So, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thank you. Members, how do you enforce this? So let's say the Supreme Court of Wyoming issued a finding saying that red flag seizure laws on the federal level were legal. Who defunds the Supreme Court? Does the Supreme Court do it? Or does the auditor do it? Who gets that decision-making power? Help me understand how in the world we would ever enforce this on the judicial branch. Or are we saying the judicial branch enforces it on the other branches, except for the part with judicial order? Then who, again, help me understand how this could possibly work. On and for the amendment. I have no idea how you would enforce this in the judicial branch.
Anyone else for their second time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Read through that paragraph, please. We're not defunding anything. We're not stripping funds. We're not allowing stripping funds. We're just telling them they can't use any funds to enact red flag laws. If they do, that doesn't take them out of the picture for us appropriating to them. So just please keep that in mind. Please vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
To the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas.
So it's a very confusing paragraph when you read it. And so I would respectfully submit that it was not well crafted, and it's hard to understand what it says. I've heard a couple of different folks come up to the mic and talk about it, and I would swear we're not reading the same paragraph, literally. To me, it's pretty direct. We're saying that if a court or a person doesn't, for one reason or for other, doesn't comply to the teeth, to every provision of this, then they can strip funds from that agency. That's simple. So you're going to strip funds from the judicial branch? Or are you going to strip funds from a city because it's law enforcement took somebody's gun in violation of this law? And you're going to make it a criminal offense, and you're going to make a fine of $50,000. And then you strip the agency of the money. So everywhere you turn, you're in a box. And I would submit that is not due process. In fact, what this bill does is strip out the ability to actually function in our judicial system and through due process. So I'm in favor.
We are voting on House third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 109. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Elliman? Allred? Repeat. Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? I'm sorry. Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
No.
Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 9 aye, 53 no.
House third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 109 has failed. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I would move third reading amendment number 6 to Senate File 109 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, so what this does, this bill creates a brand new civil action so that allows anybody to sue any entity, person, police officer, judge, for a violation of this red flag law, and have attorney's fees, and have damages, and it defines basically the damages not to exceed $50,000 per violation. So if they do it twice or continues on, then you get $50,000 assessed or a fine for violations of this. It also eliminates 7-3-511, which is the emergency assistance by a law enforcement officer immunity clause. So it wants to make sure that every law enforcement officer, if they wrongfully, whether they did it intentionally or not, take someone's gun away, then they can be sued personally and fined personally with a brand-new civil action that's the equivalent to, I don't know what. I mean, it's as draconian as it can get. I mean, literally, every step you turn, we are imposing fines, liability, and obligations, and attorney's fees for any conduct of a violation of this law as it's currently crafted. So, on in favor of the amendment.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. On and against the amendment, just say no, and let's do it in accordance with Rule 12.4 for the record. Thank you.
Do we have seconds? We do. Representative Harnack for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Stole my thunder. No, just kidding. So please be careful as you read through this section of law. We are not targeting any individual law enforcement officer. This does not apply in any way to a specific law enforcement officer. This applies to the agency. This applies to the government agency. So that government agency tells a specific law enforcement officer to go take the guns away from somebody. That law enforcement officer was just doing his job. But you can sue the agency. It leaves the law enforcement officer. We're not against law enforcement officers by doing this. But we are against government agencies using their resources to go strip guns away from law-abiding citizens. And I urge a no vote on this. We talk all the time about putting teeth into our laws, right? We say that all the time. Look at all through the Green Book. There's fines all the way through the Green Books. So we're putting teeth into this law. It's not going to be a law that's just jellyfish. We're putting a backbone into this law, and it needs to hold itself up. And the $50,000 fine seems like a reasonable amount of teeth to keep an agency from taking a step too far against our citizens here in Wyoming that are law-abiding citizens that can own a gun according to the Second Amendment. Thank you.
Representative Swanitzer Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Under House Rule 8-5, I would like to issue a protest of the House. It doesn't happen very often in this body, but we are now weaponizing the process by calling for the ayes and noes on each one of these amendments, right? With 3 lobbyists up in the North Gallery staring over us with clipboards, taking photos of our every vote. It's intimidation. And the Chair of Appropriations, right or wrong, I think we can all agree he's doing what he thinks is right for this bill and for the laws of Wyoming. He's not playing games, right? He's trying to take it seriously. And so continuing to weaponize by calling for the ayes and noes, I think is just inappropriate, and I would like to issue a protest of the House to be entered in the Journal. For those of you new to the process, it doesn't have any force or rule of law, but I do think it's important that we restore some civility to this institution and not weaponize it against our own members. Thank you.
Representative Swanitzer, pursuant to Rule 8-5, your protest will be entered in the Journal. Representative Haraldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing we need to remember here is this only applies if people break the law and furthermore break fundamentally constitutional statute. I mean, our Second Amendment federally or Article 1, Section 26 of our state. I mean, you guys, at the end of the day, that's a very severe breach. And so I believe that there's, if anything, this is not terribly severe. This is not large amounts of teeth. This is just a conversation of, hey, this is illegal and there is going to be recourse if you cross these lines. At the end of the day, you guys, the only thing standing between us and true tyranny is our Second Amendment, you guys. And so protecting that, I don't think we really can put that much of a price on it if we're being 100% honest. So I don't believe that what we see here for penalty is by any means extreme. If we're being 100% honest, I thought a criminal penalty on top of this would be a good idea. And so I think that trying to eliminate this definitely kind of flies in the face of the fact that our Second Amendment is, what price do we place on that? I don't think we can place a price on that. So on and against this amendment.
Representative Angelos, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to remind the body that we have an association of law enforcement in this state, and they are completely okay with this language. So there shouldn't be an issue on and against.
Anyone else for their first time? Anyone for their second time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It was said earlier as we debated something, and I thought it was really good, sage information. If you don't like something, just vote against the bill. But this is really not the way to do it, piece by piece, taking it away. So please, let's vote this amendment down. Let's vote. Let's get a vote on the bill. Thank you.
And to the sponsor, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you turn to page 9, starting at Roman A, it talks about a government entity and its public employees. So that's an individual. While acting within the scope of his duties are granted immunity, except for this law. So it does address people, not just the agency. So the statement that it doesn't is simply false. So every law enforcement officer is at risk as a result of this law as it's currently drafted. So on in favor of the amendment.
We are voting on House Third Reading Amendment Number 6 to Senate File 109. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Repeat? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith?
No.
Storr? Repeat? Strzok? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Walters?
Excused.
Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Henderson? No to aye. Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 10 aye, 51 no, 1 excused.
House Third Reading Amendment Number 6 to Senate File 109 has failed. We may have one final amendment. Chairman Nicholas? No. Would you like to withdraw that amendment?
No, I would withdraw the amendment.
House Third Reading Amendment Number 7 to Senate File 109 has been withdrawn. Senate File 109, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, repeat, Rodriguez-Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff,
Aye.
Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 54 aye, 8 no.
Senate File 109, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 109 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 83. Laid back. We've laid that one back. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Pursuant to 7-3, I'd ask that Senate File 83 be laid back one day. It's a reviser's bill.
Senate File 83 is laid back once again.
All right, Chief, where we at? So we're going to get a joint conference committee report first, or, yeah. Let's do the joint conference committee report. All right, we're at that order of business of consideration of joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference Committee number 1 on House Bill 138. Chairman who? 138. I think that would be Chairman Nicholas. State Funds Pool A. 138. Does that ring a bell to anybody? All right, that's not a conference committee report. It's going to be a concurrence. All right, I'm going to try a different one. We are at that order of business of request to concur, excuse me, with Senate amendments to House bills. The first message for our consideration is message 280 on House Bill 104. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move message 280 on House Bill 104. This is the Omnibus water bill planning. And the addition to it is just to give the authority to the Water Development Commission to go after funds. There are some Inflation Reduction Act dollars to the tune of $4 billion that we can go after. They're especially designated for the Colorado River Compact, and also there's a little bit of money in a regional conservation partnership program that's part of a farm bill from 2018. Those funds are still available and they could be used as well. It just gives them authority, and the rest of the bill is the same as it was when it left here. And I'd appreciate an aye vote.
Okay, we're voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 104. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand, Allred, Andrew, repeat, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas,
Excused.
Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman,
Excused. Oh, there she is.
Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 104. Representative Stivard, you got a privilege while we're trying to sort the next item out?
Yes, privilege floor.
Please go ahead.
In the back, my lovely wife up here, to the south, has brought ice cream sandwiches. So there's 6 boxes back there, so go get them.
Awesome, thank you. Here, here. Thank you much. Okay. All right, the next message for our consideration is message number 295 on House Bill 35, Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that's a bill we concurred with the Senate on, and ask for an aye vote to concur with their position.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 35. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk.
Point of order, Mr.
I'm sorry?
Speaker. Point of order. I'm just curious. Is this a message that needs to be moved to the bill, or are we
Oh, I
concurring?
think we're on a joint conference committee report. Not a concurrence.
It's Senate.
Good point of order.
What's that?
Good point of order.
Thank you.
It says joint conference committee report. So chief, I think we're organized now. So we are at that order of business of consideration of joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference Committee number 1 on Senate File 35, and we'll try this again, Chairman Washit.
Mr. Speaker, your Joint Conference Committee on Senate File 35 met this morning and concurred with the Senate amendments. And
Okay.
ask for an aye vote.
Any questions on that? Yeah, probably Chairman Washit, you should move, did you move that for concurrence? Or moving it for report, adoption?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption, Joint Conference Committee Report number 1, Senate File 35, and ask for an aye vote.
All right, is there, anybody got any questions? We're voting on Joint Conference Committee number 1 on Senate File 35. A majority of the elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Klauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley,
Excused.
Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strzok, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Storer, Pendergraft. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 59 aye, 2 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have adopted Joint Conference Committee number 1 on Senate File 35. It was tough sweeping in there at the end, but we cleared the deck. Yeah. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
I'm on that deal. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, the 7th day of March, excuse me, I wish it was May, March 2024.
Any committee announcements? Chairman Eklund.
Body and Ag Committee, I'd remind you in the morning, we're going to have a presentation by it'll be the Central High School FFA Ag Issues Team. Wyoming's been famous for doing really well at nationals, and we have a chance to help these kids improve their skills and help them along, and it's really good. You'd enjoy it. So if you're not doing anything at 8 o'clock, we'll be down in our regular Ag Conference Room, the middle one on the east side.
Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess and get an update from the Wyoming Office of Travel. So if you want to, anybody else, if you want a little deeper dive into what's going on in the travel world, come on down to E3 tomorrow at noon recess. And then tomorrow at 1:30, we were going to have an official signing of House Bill 67, which was the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. So anybody that wants to join us for that would be more than welcome. Thank you.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet with our counterparts in Capital Extension Room 5 tomorrow on noon recess to discuss interim topics. Thank you.
Chairman Eklund.
And Mr. Speaker, I forgot to mention, I still need some lists of priorities on our interim topics from some members. So if you want to get in on that, get that list to me. I believe unless you, well, yeah, just let me know that you turned it in somehow.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions Committee will meet tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in W110 to consider our interim topics with our Senate counterparts. Thank you.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Select Committee on School Facilities will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in room PMR 5 to discuss interim topics. And then your Joint Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Committee will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in PMR 6.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So 2 things, actually. First of all, your Joint Appropriations Committee will meet at 9 a.m. to go on interim topics. But ladies and gentlemen, just so everyone knows, we hope to, tomorrow afternoon, explain the joint, the budget from our committee, our conference committee, and then, unless the speaker tells us otherwise, once we explain it and we do the corrections, will be voted on Friday. Is that my understanding? Is that your understanding, Mr. Speaker?
Chairman Nicholas probably will explain it Friday morning and vote on it Friday morning. So we'll see how it runs, but that's what the across the body the president and I discussed. So that's likely to be the outcome. And so one other announcement I got: Select Water will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow in room 6 for interim topics. And I think that's about it, isn't it, Chief? All right, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, March 7th, 2024.